In the shadows whisper your demons lurking in your glow. Ancient voices call our names through the fire and the flames. Demons are real, feel the fear, the whispers dancing your
Up in the sky, what do I see? A UFO is looking at me. Lights flashing all around, bass bumping from the ground. Aliens grooving to the beat, hip-hop rhythms got them on their feet. Strange beings shaped to the flow, spaceships rocking to the show. I see a UFO flying high in the night, moving to the sound, everything's alright. Dancing in the stars and neon light, hop to the beat till the morning light. I see a UFO flying high in the night, moving to the sound, everything's alright. Dancing in the stars under neon light, hop to the beat till the morning bright. I see a UFO flying high in the night, moving to the sound, everything's alright. Dancing the stars and neon light, hop to the beat till the morning light. I'm the god, I rise and shine. In this realm I'm divine. Like the world was just a sign. Feel the power, it's all mine. All mine. Thunder claps, the sky obeys. In my hands lightning plays. Mountains bow, the ocean sway. I command night and day. On the God, feel the force. Every star on my course. Follow me, I'm the source. Life itself, no remorse. From the clouds to the ground, in my glory you are found. Eternal life, love profound. Every beat, every sound. From the clouds to the ground, in my glory you are found.
Damn, good, wonderful, wonderful morning. Unbelievable. Yo, I am having a fantastic day. I don't know about everybody else, but today is awesome day, man. I mean, I'm just feeling great. Everybody else is feeling great. I don't talk to anybody and have anybody say, man, I'm not feeling great. They don't say none of that to me because everybody is feeling great. So today's episode 80. Can you believe we made it to 80 episodes? Marona mia, I can't believe it. Oh God. So we are at 80 episodes. I can't believe it, honestly. It's awesome. I've literally had, I mean, I knew we would eventually get here, but can't believe we got here. I feel like I said the same thing at 70 and 75 episodes, but damn, I mean, it's really crazy up in here. So I'm loving it. We got a bunch of episodes left, a whole lot of stuff going on. We got a whole lot of life going on. Everything's fantastic. We got the AI up and running for if you want to mess with it for in the chat. Exclamation mark ask, and then just type whatever. And if it can't retrieve from the AI, it'll just tell you, hey, can't retrieve that information. F you. It won't say F you, but like it was funny for me to like explain it and then finish off with F you. So today's episode, I just decided to do one of those Caesar speaks like we talked about in the past, where I just literally go out and just start chatting, start yapping up the storm, and we'll figure out how long we got and how long we're going for and whatever. And this entire season so far has been pretty crazy. I mean, we've gone all the way back to the beginning. We've gone back all the way through history, as well as in the beginning of what we started talking about in our podcast, way, way, way in season one, when we started talking about human mentalities, belief systems, the mind, how a person reacts to life and situations, and how their mind interacts with them. I mean, it's really it's really an in-depth thing. It's almost it borders psychology and sociology in a way, and in a way that also borders our religious beliefs. Now, our religious beliefs are actually crazy to think about in this sort of effect, because what you really realize is our religious beliefs have pushed the way that we think about the world, both in a scientific and a spiritual connection. Like in a religious connection, it and how we socialize with each other, both within our community and outside of your community, like when you meet another culture in this example. And so and it's defined our religious and our philosophical and psychological beliefs all the way through to the main modern day. This is exactly what has gotten us straight from the get-go, is literally just as we believe in things, we judge people based off of what they believe in comparison to what you believe. And in the religious context, it's very simple to separate what I believe versus what you believe, because you have this set defined set of boundaries, set of rules, set of laws, and it's really um interesting to put it into that perspective, because you realize that whether it be Christianity or some sort of Buddhism or Hinduism or something like that, a Western or an Eastern tradition, polytheistic versus monotheistic tradition, it actually makes no difference. What you get is these beliefs in how to behave, how to live your life, how to celebrate. I mean, if you really think about it, the Ten Commandments in the Bible is just 10 basic ways on how to live your life. I mean, if you really think about it, don't kill thy neighbor. Don't have your love your neighbor's wife. Don't do all these things that like a normal person shouldn't do. Like if you really read the 10 commandments, it ain't freaking rocket science. Not at all. Like it's literally like don't do bad things. Don't steal. Don't kill. Don't rob, don't blah 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 blah. Like, don't cheat on your husband, don't do this and that. Like, it's literally it's basic rules. And why is it basic rules? Because this is how they guided their society all the way the original time back into Judaism. We talked all the way about it. Judaism comes out straight out of Sumeria. Abraham, the founding patriarch of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, came out of the city of Ur, which is a real city that archaeologists have found that existed in the ancient city of Sumeria. Ur was the capital city. And if you read the Bible, God told Abraham to flee the city of Ur and go towards the promised land. So you have right away, and then you have these set of laws. Well, who was Abraham? Abraham was the patriarch of their little tribe, of their little group of city. You could think of him as like a lord, a noble, something like the guy who owns like the land. And I mean, he was a lord in the traditional sense of a landlord. You own the land, and then people rented from you, and you got a piece of it. And think like fiefdom in the Middle Ages or something like that. Like you have the land, and the rich guy owns the land, and you farm the land in exchange for a place to live and a small wage or something like that. Like you got to think like he was the same thing. He held the little tribe together, and over the centuries and the centuries, the one tribe grew into 12 tribes. And then you hear the stories of the 12 tribes of Israel. I mean, it's literally right there. You go into what you're talking about is tribalism, but what tribalism really is in the modern day terms is community. That's really all it is this ancient tribalism became a religion because of, first of all, the fact that you believe that it's the ultimate supreme God. That's one. But it became a religion because this is what people believe. This is what they relate to. Everybody in the community relates to the same exact thing. You're not going to go and say, oh, I don't relate to that, so I'm not going to believe it. If you don't believe it, and if everybody else didn't relate to it, it wouldn't grow and continue over time and be a religion. People would literally look at it and say, hey, I don't believe this, you don't believe this, it's nonsense, forget about it. That's literally what would happen. But instead we don't have that. We have literally 3,500 plus years of recorded history. The only difference is the history is recorded in terms of religious spiritualism instead of a chronological history like we like to determine things nowadays. So it's literally, when you look at it, it's the tribalism is the sense of the community in the times. Now we, in this season and last season, we spoke about unity, coming together, people needing to mingle, to socialize. We spoke about how it was even important for the gods to socialize and mingle amongst each other, and have all these things and do all these plans that they had. It was all very important. It wasn't like it was just something. I mean, even the stories of the Greek gods and the Roman gods and the Norse gods and the Hindu gods, they're all based on relationships with each other. They're all based on stories and interactions and all these different things with each other. Some of the famous books is literally, like, for example, the city of Dwarka, we spoke about multiple times as being one of the cities that they found in archaeological remnants, and they thought it was a mythological city in the sense of mythological, like Atlantis or something like that. And you would or in what was it, in Greek terms and Norse terms, it was High Brazil or something, right? Where like a mythological land that exists far off to the wherever, unreachable by mortals or something like that. This belief in cities like Dwarka and stuff were considered in that level of mythology. Same thing with Troy. And yet we found Troy. We found Dwarka. We found the city of Ur that Sumeria supposedly came, that Abraham supposedly came from, which was the capital city of the Sumerians. Which, what did the Sumerians believe? The Sumerians believed in the Anunnaki, the multiple polytheistic gods who created humans from nothing and ruled over the earth for 250 million years. That would be way longer than the dinosaurs. Now, we've spoke about this whole sort of time frame too. Like I said, we're going to be this is just a chatting episode. This is so like me chatting is like answering questions if somebody has questions, and then or having a discussion, or going over different things that we talked about, other sorts of things, talking about some new things that we're going to be talking about in the future. So I might jump around from topics, but it's not all unrelated. That's the point. Is one idea reminds me that the next idea is is important, and that therefore reminds me of the next topic, and I say, hey, this reminds me of this topic that we talked about, and then I continue on from there, and I say, and this is why it relates to the first thing I said. So it seems like I'm jumping from topics to topics, but it all relates to the same thing. So they believed in the Sumerian gods who came from another planet inside our solar system. These gods that they believed in were supposedly real physical beings. And yet, you sit there. By the way, we got to change that message too, because ads are only running on Twitch. And so I had to get rid of LumiaBot. LumiaBot just ended up sucking. And so whatever with that. So anyway, so now I started explaining why I'm just talking about it, and I forgot about the topic I was on. I was on a roll, man. I was on a straight roll, and I forgot all about it. We're going over different sorts of things. I'm getting myself reversed in the topic. We're going over different sorts of things. We're talking about the different gods and how they mix across cultures. But it's all about, I remember I was talking about how it's all about the culture, and it's all about the society and the beliefs and the way of life. I mean, you look into it, and people who believe in a certain religion have a certain way of looking at the world, and that's not coincidental. Your religion provides you that some sort of framework. And that's not coincidental at all, because that's exactly what the whole purpose of religion was. We believed that the gods did all these different things. Every time there was an earthquake or a tsunami, Poseidon was pissed, right? Poseidon was pissed, and you had to make sacrifices to Poseidon to ensure that the earthquakes and you had to take care of the horses, because Poseidon liked horses, and you couldn't treat the horses bad, and you had to sacrifice to Poseidon to make sure he didn't do earthquakes. Well, basically, you realize that it was just a different way for us to explain the world that we didn't have the scientific understanding for. Now we know that we have earthquakes because the earth, the crust that our planet literally sits on, is actually not like a solid state. It's like an island basically floating on the liquid magma underneath. To put it more descriptive, and put it in a descriptive way. And so because of that, or basically because of that, it's a constantly moving thing. And then the tectonic plates, they move across each other, they go up and down, they rub up against each other, they go over underneath each other. So there's different sorts of how the earth reacts to that, but it's not a solid state. We know that the whole earth did not always look the exact same. Now, some of them say that they said the gods came 250 million years ago. I don't really know if that makes sense. They might say that, but it doesn't mean that it's correct. It's 100% correct. Because if you really think about it, 250 million years ago, and they didn't make humans till 250,000 years ago. Like how does that equate? Like, what were they just doing for 100 million years? Like, just chilling on the beach, having a couple Coronas? Like, I don't understand. So obviously the time frame doesn't really make sense. Now, if you put it to be like 257,000 years, and you say, like, for example, instead of 257 million years, you would make more sense, because if you say that they were here for a few thousand years or whatever, doing whatever they needed to do on here, mining. If you look at Zachariah Sitchin or other people who talk about it, it's like, what were they doing that whole time? They're not doing that for 100 million years and then one day said, "Oh, I've had enough." Like, they're probably doing it for a few decades, centuries, or even 1,000 years, but not like 100,000, 100 million years. That makes no sense. So it has to be something like they came here, like a few hundred or thousand years before they decided to create the idea of man, and then go on. So if you change that 257 million years ago to 257,000 years ago, the time frame makes more sense, because we know that human beings, not Homo sapiens in our modern sense, but hominids in the sense of two arms and two legs and two eyes and nose and a mouth, started to appear on the earth about 250,000 years ago. Human beings, the modern day Homo sapiens is like somewhere around 50,000 years ago. So again, the time frame is crazy. You have 200, if you're talking about, then they started creating people 250,000 years ago, and modern Homo sapiens only came about around 50,000 years ago. You're talking about 200,000 years of different hominids living on this planet interacting with each other. And some of them may not have interacted with each other. It all depends. I mean, we're finding some that they were able to trace some of these DNA into some of the local population in the area, that 100,000 years later into the modern time, we're having like slight traces of these people's DNA that we're able to test from the bones that we discovered through our modern day genetic studies. And so it was so we were able to do these sort of testing. And so what you get is that the time frame is massive. These people have, what else do you call them? They're different hominids, but who we know that they had abstract thought. We found cave paintings that the Neanderthals created, and everything. Games with snakes, my brother. How you doing, my friend? I haven't seen you in so long, dude. Like, what are you doing, my friend? Uh, Dude, we are talking some wild, deep stuff, bro. Today's episode 80, bro. If you think this is crazy, bro, I've had 80 episodes of crazy conversations. Like, this is nothing to what what I've said before. We spoke about how the idea of I appreciate you coming in, man, means so much to me. You have no idea, seriously. And even just saying hello means so much to me, bro. I appreciate it, man. It's awesome. Good to see you again. Good to see you back in motherfucking action, in straight action packed. Um, we literally talked about how we'll get into it probably today, but we literally talked about how the idea of a devil and Lucifer and demons can all be translated back to the idea of a fallen god. Oh no, don't worry about interrupting. I like being interrupted. It's supposed to be a conversation, not like, I could sit here and talk the paint off the wall if I wanted to. Like, I like being interrupted. But no, we were talking about how like, you could point these facts all the way back thousands of years. to different beliefs and cultures that existed thousands of years before that. And the other day I was watching a documentary on Christianity and the beliefs of smaller religions at the same exact time as when, or like right before and slightly right after, like Jesus time, which is like around, somewhere between like 20 and 30 AD. And it was so interesting because there's one religion, I forgot the name of it because I just learned about it, so it's not, I didn't have time to take notes or whatever, but and they were like, it was literally Christianity to a T, 100% one-to-one relationship, but Jesus didn't even exist. They weren't even like, they were in like some like abstract country around there. Like they were like some like small tiny sect inside the far distant Roman Empire that somehow had the exact one-to-one relationship of Christianity's beliefs in the modern times all the way back then, before Jesus even existed. Like, what? How does that even make sense? I got to look this up because I just learned about this and I was like, and it reminds you of how our modern times, we only like Christianity is like basically a combination of all the other of so many different, of not all the other, but so many different other religions. Like we literally had you literally look at, like, for example, Christmas. Like, Christmas is just the equinox. It's just the farming, the harvesting, the shortest day of the year. It's moon cycle worship. That's literally all it is. And it comes together and you think Jesus was born that day. Come to think about it, he was born in like June or July. Like we do all these things and you compare the historical time frame with ancient Roman records that we still have, and you figure out that Jesus was probably alive and born during like June. And what's even crazier is because of all these Roman records, we know that Jesus was a real person. Like that's what's crazy too. Is like you can go back and like this guy was a real person, really condemned for these real crimes. Like it was really crazy to think about. And they used to just crucify people all day. I spoke about how once that I believe that Jesus's whole entire point was actually a political statement against the Roman Empire. Because if you read into the Bible, when he is born, when him and when Mary and Joseph are traveling to Bethlehem to go and register for the Roman census, that's where the whole story of the manger comes from. They're literally traveling to register for the Roman census. That was the whole point of their trip in the Bible. They're registering for the Roman census and they go back. Then this road that they walk is like one of the most famous Roman roads of the time in that area. Then they have to walk the same road back. 10 years later, they have to do the same thing. And the Bible literally says this. And there's the whole entire story of Jesus as 10 years old and walking down this road. And at the time, the Roman emperor crucified over 2,000 civilians and nailed them up every 20 yards, all the way down the entire highway. 2,000 people lined up every 20 yards. Do the math on how many miles that is. Okay, so imagine 10-year-old Jesus walking down, a 10-year-old kid. Imagine a 10-year-old kid walking down this road for miles and miles and miles of just people. And remember, crucifixion did not kill you instantly. Some people like lasted a few hours. Some people lasted days on the cross. Days. Like, and And that's why if you read the Bible too, when Jesus is on the cross, that's why the Romans go to break his knees, because what happened was is you would go up there and they would put you on this little platform underneath your feet to hold you up so that you would get this little thing, because when your arms are being held up like this, your lungs are being stretched like this. I watched this whole documentary on crucifixion. It was crazy. And your lungs are being stretched like this. So keeping your lungs permanently stretched outwards, like in an elongated fashion, you don't allow your lungs to fully expand. So what happens over time is you get shorter and shorter breaths. You're getting less and less oxygen to your body and ultimately to your brain. And so when you're sitting there and you're getting tortured, it's a slow, painful death. You're literally being tortured slowly because you're slowly losing your ability to breathe over time. It's actually horrific. And now imagine a 10-year-old kid walking down the road and seeing all of this is horrifying. I would be horrified. I'm horrified just talking about it, and you should be too, because otherwise you're a sociopath without any empathy. Like, like it's terrible. And like, imagine being 10 years old. Remember what you were doing at 10 years old? It was not walking down a road looking at people being crucified for 200 miles. Like, it was not that. Okay. So that must have stuck with him. Now, what's interesting too is none of the beliefs in all these things is different to what Judaism says. Jesus talked about being a good person, doing all these things. What is that? That's the opposite of murdering a bunch of people and crucifying them on the cross. That's also written in Judaism, in the Torah, in all of their different texts. It's not rocket science either to be a good person. God gives us these answers in the Ten Commandments. 1,500 years before Jesus is even born. He literally says, "Oh, don't steal from your neighbor. Don't bang your neighbor's wife. Don't murder your husband. Don't murder anybody." Like, how is that rocket science? It's literally a belief in a culture about being a good person. It's not. It's not some abstract thought. It's literally just straightforward. So imagine being a little kid and looking out into this and seeing this. It would stick with me. I would get involved today in our own modern times. If I saw that at 10 years old, I would grow up to be a politician, 100%, because that's the only way that you could change it. And in those times, you couldn't be a politician unless you were born from noble descent. So if you were a descendant of Roman nobility, you were given a seat in the Senate. You were born into the Senate, and you were allowed to have the say and the votes and all those things. But if you weren't nobility, you didn't have squadul. So, you could literally look and say, oh, you could literally look and go, oh, he had all these beliefs and whatever. But if I was a kid, I would literally look and say, oh my God, like, how are people okay with this? How is the Roman Empire ruled over thousands of miles, massive amounts of countries? Look at a map and how many countries today exist where the Roman Empire, one country, once stood. They encompass North Africa, all of freaking Europe, almost, until the end when they did occupy all of Europe, all the way to Moscow. And literally you would go all the way to Istanbul in the Middle East, bro, in the Far East. And all over the place, in Greece, in southern Mediterranean, North Africa, parts of Central Africa, all the way down. They conquered Egypt, Greece, England, all the Germanic tribes in the north. Like, they conquered all these areas, and today these people still can't get along. And yet, at one point, you used to be one country and one culture. Like, it's unbelievable. In fact, if you look, the Romans actually, many historians look at the Romans as their allowance of multiple cultures as being their downfall, because the Romans didn't care what you believed. If you wanted to be a Roman citizen, you had to believe in the Roman gods and all those things. But they didn't care what you believed as long as the income and the taxes were coming in, and that's why when you read the Bible and Jesus goes to the temple and overturns the money changers' tables and preaches to them about how God's house is not meant to be a den of thieves. You're not supposed to do business in God's house. You're supposed to worship God and nothing else, right? So, which makes sense to me. There's a church and there's a store. I don't go to church to buy my milk. Like it's not again. It's not freaking rocket science. So you literally, it makes sense to me. But in Roman perspectives, this is where Jesus becomes a political enemy because you interrupted the trade of commerce. And not only that, remember that when he did that, the place was shut down for the day. Think if some guy walked in uninvited into Main Wall Street. You think Wall Street's not going to shut down for the day? Hell yeah, they're going to lock that building down. NYPD is on the way. Like there's no way. Like there's no way they're not doing that. Come on. So like, it would be the same sort of thing. The whole place is shut down. The Roman soldiers are there. And if you read the Bible, it's exactly what happened. The Roman soldiers showed up and Jesus and his apostles escaped. And they met a friend and they hid out in their house. And then they went over to this garden and Jesus sat there and meditated. And that's when Judas came and betrayed him. So you have this political concept interwoven with religious beliefs. And in those days, there was no difference. There was no difference between religious beliefs and political concepts. It was the way of life. The fact that the gods controlled everything, the fact that Poseidon controlled all this shit and everything, like it was a way of life. It was fact. There was no getting around it. So you either had to believe or whatever, but it was fact, and there was no difference between that being a fact and the fact of some sort of society's belief. But the Romans allowed you to believe whatever you wanted. They tolerated Judaism, and they always during this whole time frame of Passover, because it's the deliverance from Egyptian slavery and tyranny 1,300 years prior, the Romans every single year always send in extra troops into Jerusalem. And so when Jesus does this, the troops are already there. It's like sending in the National Guard today. It would be the same sort of thing. You send in the local militia to quell the unrest of the civilians. It's really no different than today. It's just how you perceive it. So going back to, if I was Jesus when I was a kid and I saw this, I would say, this is horrible. How could we let these people rule over us? And then if I was slightly intelligent, I would be able to realize that if these people rule by brutality and force, which is exactly what the Romans did, and I want to change that, then I have to be the opposite of that. Instead of being brutality and force, I have to be peace. This is also one of the reasons why the Jews don't look at Jesus as being the Messiah. If you look at the Messiah definition in all sense of the words in Judaism, it's actually a warrior king. It's literally like you want to think King David, King Solomon in the Bible, like, these types of things. They led armies and conquered things. You want to think of all the biblical characters. You want to think of Moses during the time. These guys were warrior kings. They fought and they led their people out of of all these terrible sorts of their lives. They led their people out of this. I mean, Moses literally led all these people out of slavery, out of Israel, and that's literally their definition. And he was a warrior too. He was trained by the Egyptians in their own court, and then he went off into the desert for 40 years. And then after he frees the Jewish slaves, the Israelites, he goes there and takes them into the desert and trains them for another 40 years. They sit there and they train. Every one of these people becomes a warrior. So literally Moses is technically would be considered a Messiah. And also, there's nothing in Judaism saying that there's only one Messiah. You can have multiple messiahs over time because it's the definition of a warrior king who delivers their people from some sort of trying time, some sort of horribleness or whatever. So when they look at that and they look at Jesus, he's not the Messiah because he's not a warrior king in their sort of perspective. But Christians look at it a little differently. They look at it as being, the chosen one of God or something, which the belief in a chosen person of a deity goes back thousands of years to multiple religions. Shamanism's is also another one who is chosen, accepted by the gods to preach the words, to be their connection between the gods and the mortals. It is all connected to each other. And so when you look at all these different connections and beliefs in these religions and in these people, you can see how the connections are interwoven between each other. And also we got, I don't even remember where I started up. Oh, we started off on we got all into this topic for 42 minutes. For 40 minutes, because we have the intro for 3 minutes and 33 seconds. For 40 minutes, this whole topic started talking about because I started talking about society and culture. The people believe in what they believe because in the society and in the culture. Our interpretations of many of the Eastern traditions is wrong because we view it from our own Western perspectives. We look at these different beliefs as being we look at these different beliefs in comparison to what we believe in our Western traditions, but what they believed in the East is not necessarily what we believed in the West. There was the realm of the gods, and then there was the realm of the humans. And what's interesting is, is a lot of Eastern traditions believe in reincarnation. We know this. What's interesting is that Christianity, one of their firm original pillars in the beginning, was about belief in reincarnation. And where does that belief come from? Because Jesus was reborn. Hello, Jesus was technically reincarnated in all fabric of the words. So you literally have this belief in reincarnation. Unfortunately, there were not more than one, but I can think of only two off the top of my brain, where these cultures literally believed, and they were some of the first suicide cults in Christianity. They would literally just kill themselves, and because they believed that by doing so, they would be with God, because they would be with God in the next life, and they would be reborn and reincarnated with God as long as they did it with their spiritual mind in connection with God. I mean, that's a gross exaggeration of what Jesus went through and what all these other people believe in it. Yet some people believe that this was the way to go about it, which led for the church to to declare suicide a sin and to declare reincarnation is not a thing. So it's really interesting how all these religions really connect together. And I have on my screen over here all the different podcast episode titles that we went through. And it's really interesting because I look at the title and it's like the memory of the podcast episode comes back to me. Like I'm looking at season 1 episode 14. So episode 14 was titled Belief. And all I talked about for the whole time was the belief within people and how that's the driving force. Then the next episode, I talked about fraudulence. I talked about how another person could be a fraud in their beliefs and disguise it as being some sort of belief, like a religious belief or a way of life or some sort of spiritualism or whatever. So, so and what's interesting too is I know we talk about aliens a lot, but I never even talked about aliens until season 2, so episode 16 and beyond, because for a specific purpose. I wanted to in the beginning talk about society and culture and our beliefs and how that's impacting, because that's how I got started in believing these things. I was sitting there in my religious class reading the literal Bible, story after story. And at the same time, in school and in martial arts and in my own time, I was learning about different other cultures and their beliefs and what they look at and what they believe in. And I was noticing the connections between the two. During our samurai episodes, just a few episodes ago, the warrior mind and the samurai mind, we started talking about, and we started referring to the beginning when we talked about Zen Buddhism, which was episode 10, and a couple other times we touched on the topic. But when we went into the topic of the warrior mind and the samurai mind, I mentioned their belief in the gods and their celestial homeland, Takamegahara, and how it sounded similar to both Buddha's idea of a celestial heaven, to the other culture's idea of a realm that exists beyond this world, our modern science example of other dimensions, higher dimensions, low ulterior dimensions, and alternate dimensions. And I spoke about how it's connected together, because I was reading these things 12 years old or less. I don't even remember how old I was exactly, but I'm reading these things and comparing them. And then I'm sitting there reading the Bible, and at the same time, it sounds like the war in heaven with Amaterasu and Susanoo. And then at the same time, it sounds like Zeus and his brothers fighting and Hades. And at the same time, it sounds like Jupiter and Poseidon and Odin and Thor. And I'm reading all these different cultures. And then you go into Mesopotamia and culture with the Sumerians, and then you travel to the other side of the planet and you look at South American cultures like the Mayans and all these things. They believed in a celestial heaven too. They're on the literal other side of the world, people, and they believe the same exact thing. There's an Ancient Aliens episode where they go and they bring the Hindu specialist over, and they start showing him statues, and he's pointing out exactly how in South America, you know that they literally had sculptures and depictions that looked exactly like Hinduism. And what's so interesting is Shiva in southern Italy, oh my God, southern India is mainly depicted with fangs in their teeth. And if you look at the same depictions in South America, that they were talking about, they literally have the same depictions. Shiva has these depictions of with the fangs, and with the fangs, and he's like, this is literally the same picture. And then he's holding the skull that they do, and he's got the two gatekeepers and all of this. Well, why do they call it a gatekeeper? Why is he standing there in some sort of doorway and he's got two gatekeepers? Well, think about it this way, okay? Let's postulate it from two different examples. Or let's just start off with one example and we'll see if I need to clarify the point further. Imagine a noble. Any noble, a king, an emperor, the president of the United States today. Who surrounds them? Their guards, the Secret Service, their security. Think of kings. The king would walk into a room and he's got an army of 5, 10 guys walking behind him to protect his every single move. And, the Romans did the same thing. And they have these guys that come with them, their protection, right? Well, what if you were a noble god? Who are you going to bring with you? Your retinue, your guards, your protectors. And this is exactly what all these texts say all the time. It's not like something totally new. And so what you're looking at could be the same. Now, if you want to flip it even further and take it into the ancient alien perspective, the aliens would do the same exact thing. Imagine, instead of the doorway, quote unquote, that's supposedly Shiva standing in, guarded by the gatekeepers on either side of him. Imagine you land in your spaceship and the door opens up, and the first people that come out are your guards, and they come out of the door, they clear the way for you in the front, they stand guard, and then you walk out the main door. And what does that look like from a 2D perspective? It literally looks like a guy standing in a gateway or a doorway with his two security guards on the side. I mean, they would do the same thing. Just because they're aliens with advanced technology, somebody else also might have advanced technology. It has nothing to do with their supposed power and whatever. Somebody else could be just as powerful. And so you can therefore surmise that what you're looking at might in fact be a depiction of a god and his guards and his retinue. And what do you read in the text? When the god appeared, a bunch of other gods followed him. Think about when the first Watchers came down, depicted in the Bible. When the Watchers came down, 1,001 gods came out. Well, who's the one god? The one god is the leader of this retinue, and the 1,000 of them is his 1,000 best friends. And he's bringing them along, and his soldiers and all of that, and they're all coming out of the door, and they're landing here. What are you going to call that? You're going to call that like a small armada. It's not like a legion, but it's like a small grouping of troops. So when you look at it from that perspective, it actually starts to make sense. We would do the same thing. Think about humans traveling 2,000 years from now, leaving Earth, and I'm going to some far-off planet. And I'm going to get there, and all of a sudden there's people there. What am I going to do? Right? I'm going to get out, the door is going to open, and I'm going to walk out of it. Right? Unless we figure out teleportation powers or some shit, I have to walk through the door. Like, you're literally not going to get out unless you walk through the literal door. Like, hello? You're not going to get out of the ship. So you got to walk through the door or teleport. It's the only way to do it. So, like, you have to look at it and you go, oh my God, this makes some sort of sense. Humans would do the same thing. You think that I'm going to land in some foreign planet, 2 million light years away from my home planet, and I'm going to just take the chance to waltz right out? I mean, what if I walk out and the freaking grass is alive and it eats me? Well, there goes my shit. I'm dead. Bye bye. Like, what do you mean? So it makes total sense. It makes total sense that they would do something like this because we would do the same exact thing. It has nothing to do with anything except that we would all do it, bro. It makes pure sense. And so it's so interesting because we would do the exact same thing. We would come together and unify. And then these people would say, hey, we work together and your society is not that great and this is how you can make it better. And guess what? Every culture says the same thing. If you look at Japan and China, the first kings and the gods that came to them gave them their society and their culture. What did we just say for the first 45 minutes of the show? We talked about Judaism and Christianity and all of that, and what do? Their God gave them the rules for their society and their culture. Remember, I said it wasn't rocket science. I said, don't steal, don't have sex with your friend's wife, don't rob somebody, don't commit murder. It's not rocket science. It's straight up a thing. How to live a good life. And guess what? You have these stories. If you look in the Bible, the first one, Cain and Abel, Cain murders his brother Abel, and then Cain gets the mark and banished from the kingdom from God's kingdom here on earth. And what does Cain do? Why? Because Cain was a murderer. God is trying to show us in this story that murdering people is not okay. I mean, again, it's not rocket science. If you think murdering people is okay, you have a problem. And so, it's like, but this is what our religions and our societies and our cultures are built upon, is these beliefs all throughout the world. And then we also have the same belief. We believe in a God and a good and dark force. What is that in Eastern tradition? It's a yin and yang. It's a balance. You can't. Some people say if God is, many religious scholars say if God created Lucifer to be his devil, his one that rules over hell, and if Lucifer rebelled, how come God can't just snap his fingers and delete Lucifer from existence? Right? Well, yeah, he could actually. He probably could if he's the all omnipotent God that our religions and priests try to teach us. So if you look at it from that perspective, he could just snap his fingers and be gone. But then religious scholars say, well, it's necessary to have the Lord of evil as it is to have the Lord of good. What is that? Yin and yang, balance. It's all about balance in life. And what is that teaching us in our personal life? You need to have a balance. You need to have a work-play balance. You need to be able to socialize with people and do all these things and be involved in your community. And that's what religion was telling us all these thousands of years ago. Everybody gets involved in the community. This is why you group together. It's you're a community together. And there's also, of course, other aspects to it, which I spoke about. We did an episode, it was episode 35, The Spoken Word, where I spoke about how our vibrations in our voice physically act, this is true for quantum mechanics, physically act upon the universe. Every time you speak, you're moving the air molecules around you, and you're moving the air molecules in your lungs and in your body, and all of that is vibrating off your lungs, your skeletal structure, your bone, your teeth, all of your tongue, all of it. It's all vibrating, and all of that makes your sound, makes your specific voice, makes your everything. And so if you speak in a certain way, you would be impacting the universe around you. And so Jesus said, "Where you are, I am too." But he said, "Where two or more of you are, I am there with you." He said, I think I messed up the quote, but where two of you are, I am there too. And what he was trying to say was, the more people together focused on the same task, on the same prayer of goodness, will see that prayer through, will cause it to manifest in reality for two reasons. Maybe he did or didn't know this. We have no idea. But if you literally speak about these things and you're physically impacting the air molecules, maybe on some sort of spiritual energy level, you're impacting the universe around you. And maybe that's what we look at as like coincidence or something like that. We don't know, but it's possible in some sort of way. So if you look at it from that perspective, though, what he was saying is together, by doing that, you're influencing the world around you. But on the other perspective, it's about community. It's about community and togetherness. If I go to church and we're all praying for somebody to get better, and then the local guy in the town who owns the store that everybody goes to, and you go there and we're all praying for his health, and the guy, whatever's going on in his life, well, the prayer might not do something itself, but each person in that place remembers that we prayed for so and so to get better, to go through all these things. And so in my day-to-day life, the next day after church, on my way home from work, I might remember that, hey, Jimmy's sick, and let me call him up. Maybe I could bring him some soup or something. Do something. Maybe I go to his house and help him out with his laundry, because the guy's got the shit piled up for weeks, because, he can't move, or something like that. Like, the point is though, that you're thinking about that person and you're doing it, and so is everybody else in the community. And then together, by your action, you're working together to make this goal come into fruition, come into reality. And so by this measure, you're literally looking at people and going, okay, we're all doing this and we're doing it as a group. So therefore, it's what we it'll get done. It'll become active. It'll come into fruition more because more people are working on it. Our founding fathers thought the same thing. We thought, hey, we would have all these smart people come together and we'd be able to figure shit out and blah, blah, blah. And turns out 8 years later, it all went down the tubes, and now we're 200 years later, whatever. But, it's like, it's really difficult. But you look at these cross comparative references, and so we went through a lot of different things, but man, I can't believe we started talking about this, all about culture and belief. People and community. Community is the key thing. I always talk about it, and I'm bad for this too, but we got to get active more in our local communities. It's so important, because the local community is where it starts. Your local politician doesn't just become president tomorrow, doesn't just become, a congressman, a senator right off the jump. They got to start from somewhere, just like the rest of us. And if you keep supporting these people that you think are crazy, well, guess what? Then only the crazies are going to keep getting through. So if you want to change that, start in your local community and work your way up from there. vote in your local election, attend your local town board meeting, do all these certain things because it's so important for our cultures and our society. And these ancient religions taught us that thousands of years ago because all these people would get together for events. You would come to the major city for the event. It was millions of people would travel all across the wherever the lands were to come to the homeland or whatever place to celebrate. People still do this today. People in India still take pilgrimages, and in Tibet and in South America, in so many cultures, they take pilgrimages that the same people thousands of years ago took pilgrimages for. I mean, and why? Because the culture still does that. Look at Islam. They do the same thing. You still have to go to Mecca. You have to make your pilgrimage to Mecca. It's the same thing all the way to this modern day. People still do the same thing. And what do they do when they get there? They come together, they talk, they exchange ideas. Sometimes they fight, of course. Not everybody can get along, but they come together as a group, as a community. Everybody in there is united in their beliefs. That's what's important. Is everybody in like, for example, let's say you're in Mecca, right? Everybody there is united under their beliefs in Islam, right? In their beliefs in Muhammad, and their beliefs in Abraham and Ishmael building the Kaaba. You have to, his first son, Ishmael, by the way, which I kind of want to get into that topic now because it's so interesting. Okay, ready? Okay. Speaking of culture, okay, let's jump into this real quick. Speaking of culture, okay, Abraham and his son Isaac. Isaac was not the firstborn son to Abraham. Ishmael was. Ishmael was born to one of his concubines, a former servant girl to his wife Sarah. Now, what's interesting is Abraham, like we said, comes out of the city of Ur, which was in Sumeria. Now, what's interesting is that in Sumerian culture, the true heir to your inheritance, your throne, your kingdom, whatever the case may be, was the firstborn of the union between you and your half sister. Okay? So the Sumerians believed this, and they believed this because this was the gods. Because the gods, Anu, had two sons, Enki and Enlil, both with different, they were half brothers. And Enki was born first, but Enlil was the heir because Enlil was born of the union between Anu and his half sister. The same story takes place in the Hebrew Bible. Abraham has two children that were half brothers, Ishmael and Isaac. But Isaac is born of the union between Abraham and Sarah. Sarah was Abraham's half sister. It says all this in the Bible. You people have to read. And Abraham and Sarah were half brother and sister. And then they had the son, Isaac. It's the same story as the Anunnaki, just told from a different cultural perspective. Now, it may be true. In fact, it was probably not like a retelling of the same story, but in fact, it probably was a similar story. He had a concubine and he had a wife, and they both had two kids that were half brothers. And he chose the one who was the heir of his half sister because that was the rule of the cities of Ur that was ruled by the Sumerians that believed in the Anunnaki, and that's what their culture believed. Their culture believed that they were that the union of the half brother and sister was the true heir. So when Isaac comes into the picture, well, what's he going to do? He's going to follow his culture and his beliefs, and his culture and beliefs were that Isaac was the true heir and therefore was the one who would do it. And now, thousands of years later, we still follow the descendancy of Isaac in our culture versus Ishmael. And we know that in Islam, they follow the descendancy of Ishmael and not Isaac. Well, what about the people who followed Enki and not Enlil? It's the same sort of thing. Now, like I said, it may not be an exact one-to-one retelling of the story. In fact, it may be that both things are just happen to be similar experiences because of the half brother and half sister thing, but it doesn't mean that necessarily it was the same story just being retold. What it really means is that the same thing happened, and he drew on his knowledge and experience from his own culture in order to make a decision of what to do, and that decision of what to do was push out Ishmael because he was not the true heir, because he was not the child of his half sister. So that's exactly what you're looking at. And these culture beliefs have been with us for thousands of years, thousands of years. And so you continue on all the time, and you look and you say, oh, all these thousands of people for centuries and centuries believe in this one deity, this one thing, and what you're really looking at is the translation of your culture over centuries, over thousands of years, over how you perceive the world around you and how you interact with it. And how you interact with the world around you is based on your culture, based on your beliefs, based on you and how you perceive things. Life is all about perception. Think about in physics with the double slit experiment. You look at it and it takes on one thing, but without having the active observer, it can take on a whole new form. So it's very interesting because it proves, or at least on some level proves, that the world is existing off of your perspective. That's really the key. And so how you bring in culture all throughout this time is really just how you translate your beliefs over thousands of years. And I these how do I want to keep wording the next of it? We had I did a lot of episodes on culture and unification. One of our episodes was titled Romulus, and I wanted to talk about how I spoke about Romulus and Remus and the founding of the Roman Empire and the city of Rome, and how it was a same similar sort of thing. Oh my God, I almost slurred all those S's together. It was the same similar sort of thing where you have the two brothers, and the two brothers had different beliefs and they fought amongst each other, just like Enki and Enlil, just like Ishmael and Isaac, and all these other brothers all throughout different cultures. You think that Christianity and Judaism were the only ones? Forget about it, dude. There are other beliefs too. Like some people don't believe that they believe Jesus was the only child. And if you read the Bible, it talks about the brothers of Jesus and sisters. So how could he be an only child if he has brothers and sisters? And so it's all about how you perceive things. Let me see. So the culture aspect is really how you interweave your beliefs throughout your life. Even in our own lives. I mean, if I was only exposed to Christianity and these cultures and not everything else like I was, There's no way I wouldn't just strictly believe in Christianity. Of course I would. So would you. I mean, like without being exposed to anything else, what else do you know? It's like being in a cult in an extreme sort of comparison. If you know nothing else, then that's all you know, and you don't, whether it's the truth or not makes no difference because you don't know anything different. And that's what I wanted to go into. So I talked about there's an um episode 28, Lightbringer. And I spoke about how Lucifer, Lux Fade, Lightbringer in Latin, Lucifer was the Lightbringer. Just like how Prometheus brought fire to the humans, brought light and knowledge to the humans, so did Lucifer. Lucifer didn't only bring fire, didn't only conquer and try to do and rebel. At first, if you read the Bible, he brought knowledge to the people. Arts, sciences, how you hunt, do all these things. He was the knowledge seeker. So when you read in the story of the Bible that Lucifer was the one who wanted to give them the fruit of knowledge, what was he giving them? He was giving them their basics for their knowledge. He was educating them. And this, according to God, was a no. No. Human beings were not supposed to be educated. You were supposed to live in eternal bliss, in the garden, in ignorance and stupidity. And Lucifer said, I don't want any of that. I want them to know who they are. I want them to know what we know. I want them to eventually one day be equal to us in every aspect of every sort of way. And God said, no, you can't do that. This is not what they were for. They were meant to be blah, 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 blah. And so, you have all these different perspectives. But what's most important is in the Lightbringer perspective. If you read the Bible, Lucifer was the first being created by God out of anything. The first being created. And he was the most bright, the enlightened one, the shining star of heaven. He was the bright one. He was the Lord of good, but he always questioned everything. And 2 episodes ago, in our episode, The Samurai Mind, I made references to the Bible and the book of Job in comparison to in the samurai sort of way and being diligent in your beliefs. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't learn and change your beliefs but being steadfast and strong is important, because if you don't fight what you believe in, you don't actually believe in that. And if you don't have the facts to back up what you're saying and what you believe in, or if you, like, say, get a fact wrong or something and you can't admit that, that's where the issue comes in. But anyway, so I referenced the book of Job because Job is tested by Lucifer with the approval of God, and the story that they give it paints an imagery in your head of Lucifer and God and Michael and the other angels, Uriel and all of them, sitting around at a conference table. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like them sitting around at a conference table having a conversation like, hey, what do you think, Billy? I don't know. What do you think, Jimmy? I don't know. What do you think, Lucifer? I don't know. What do you think, Michael? Like all these things. And they're sitting there having a debate. And they're sitting there and, God's like, give me an update. What's our itinerary? What's our thing? Give me my information. And he's like, oh yeah, all this is going great. And Lucifer's like, what are you talking about? None of it's going great. Sure, you got this and that, and then the whole story continues. But the point is it's the debate. And yet you have this idea of being the demon, the devil. So the question is if the story in the Bible is true, that the Lucifer rebelled and they had these two wars in heaven, then wouldn't the story of Job predate those wars in heaven, predate Lucifer being a rebel? What's also interesting is you have an extremely similar story in Greek mythology where all the gods, including Hades, are all sitting around, the god of the underworld, are all sitting around at a table. And why? Because why is Hades there? Many scholars say this. Why? Because Hades is a lord. He's a council member. He's literally the lord of the underworld. For all intents and purposes, he's a king of his own dimension, his own realm for all intensive purposes. And he literally is sitting there and having this. And why do they explain that he is there in Greek mythology? Because you can't have the light without the darkness. And it's the same thing why modern Christian scholars would say, why would Lucifer be there when God is there having this meeting and they're talking amongst each other? Why can't, like I said before, why is it that God wouldn't just snap his fingers and be gone and done with Lucifer? Because you can't have the light without the dark. What do we call that? Yin and yang, balance. You think that I'm pulling all these different topic connections, but they all mean something. I don't forget what I'm saying. I remember everything. But it's sometimes I'll be honest, I do forget what I'm saying in the immediate moment, but tough. And remember, we don't do a script. We do no script ever. I've never had a script the entire time we've done this. But one of the bad things we talked about was I did an episode called Centrism, where it's about making everything about you from your perspective. It doesn't matter what other people in the world believe because, you're focused on your center, on your belief, on your city and society and culture and blah, blah, blah. That's centrist. Also, you look at these things and um you look at some of these beliefs and you say it they're self-serving. That's the word or the term I'm looking for. It's self-serving in your beliefs where it helps you and only helps you and doesn't help anybody else. So a lot of these cultures, when they interact with other cultures and even individual people, when they interact with other cultures or other people, it would be what we call closed-minded also. You're unable to listen to other beliefs and other perspectives simply because it doesn't agree with what you were taught or with what you believe or what you agree with. And so it's really so when you're like that, you're self-centered, you're all about yourself, and so we've had a lot of different things, but all these topics that we've ever talked about, I feel like are all interconnected. This is now 80 episodes, and literally all these topics are interconnected. We've had different topics. We go all the way through to aliens, to modern alien theory, all the way to different concepts. I saw I don't know if I told you, but I like 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, maybe my sense of time in my head is so fucked up. Like I'm telling you, it was January a few hours ago, if from my perspective. Like December is like in 20 minutes. Like my time frame is so fucked up. It's like it's really crazy. And that's another thing is I did an episode on time frame too. I got the title right here. That's why I just saw that in the corner of my eye. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I talked about that. But I talked about it from different perspectives of our timeline and our belief, not exactly from a certain perspective of time. I did talk about certain perspectives of time in other instances. We did an episode 44 called Time Dilation, where we talked about the relationship of different time on the planet. Um, where we talked about the relationship of different of time measuring in our history, and where we talked about time separation and differences between different planets, and how if those planets were to interact with each other, like say there was a culture from each one of those planets, and say like for example, let's roll with the idea that 3600 years on Earth is 1 year for the Anunnaki gods. Well, if you roll with that idea, your time dilation would be 3,600 years. So literally talk about the blink of an eye. If you were from that perspective and you blinked, like what 50 years would go by, that's two whole generations. Remember, a generation is defined as 25 years. So if 50 years goes by, that's two generations. And especially if you're talking about in ancient times where people barely lived past 25, past 30, and if you were well fed, you barely lived past 40. I mean, come on. So, you're talking about a different time frame, a different perspective. And but we got slightly drifted from the topic of culture and centrism. But again, we didn't have no specific topic today. I was just so excited to reach 80 episodes that I was like, man, I just want to talk. I just want to hang out. Go through all these different topics and things. And it's always good to reiterate what we spoke about in the past, because not only for people who haven't listened before, or I mean, dude, if you I wanted to be this way, but it's hard for people to go back to listen to 80 episodes, 2 hours each. Like that's crazy, So, I would love if you did that, but it most people probably wouldn't do that, So it's okay, but we have to reiterate subjects and topics because of that. And not only that, but it brings it to my forefront of my memory. I remember that this is what we talked about because I'm talking about it again. And I say, oh, yeah, I remember that I spoke about this and this was my main point, like, so I talked about different whole things. Oh, that's another one. I spoke earlier about how speaking and manipulates the air around you, and I made the episode of spoken word I named. But I also had episode 30 where I spoke about the same similar sort of topic of sound in a more physics perspective. So, we talk about a lot of like religious beliefs here and aliens and all different things like that, but we also talk about society and culture. I wanted to do this because this is what I like. This is my favorite topics. Some of you guys like sports, and I mean, I like sports too, but I like to play sports. I don't really like to watch sports. I'm not a watch sports type of guy, but like I do watch sports. Like I'm not gonna lie, I like sports. But like, I used to play a lot of sports and be very physically active and stuff, but you know, f- watching every game and stuff, that's not really me. But, everybody's got their own thing. And guess what? That's part of our culture too. Think about how many bars you go to and they all got the TVs up with the game on. Some people just go to a bar to go watch the game because they want to drink and they want to socialize and they do all these things. I mean, that's where sports bars came about. People go to a sports bar because they want to hang out, socialize, drink, and watch the game, and they got nobody to do it with. And guess what? You're all there in the same building for the same reason, doing the same thing. What is that called? That's called community. We just spoke about this for an hour and 27 minutes. It's literally the same thing. And when you're unified in your belief as a culture, yes, we spoke about how you could get into that centrist and blind perspective, but in a way, it also brings your perspectives together. Because if I'm unified and you're unified, if we could sit here and have a full on discussion, a one to one discussion, and going on, like it would literally be that's what it is. That's how we're unified. You don't need to fight. Of course, you can get into an argumentative discussion or all these sorts of things or get animated in your what you're talking about and whatever. But if it goes into the violence, then that's not good. But having a discourse and a debate is not bad. It shows a sense of unity in a community because you're all involved. I haven't taken a sip of water this whole time. I'm so thirsty, bro. Oh my God. I feel like I needed more water than that, but it's fine. But I also love the topic of extraterrestrials in a way because one of the reasons too is if you look at it from a certain perspective, you realize that we tried to do this in our own culture and society, and I don't want to say failed, but we failed. We didn't make a unified culture that's now traveling into space like Werner von Braun wanted to do. Remember, there was those videos in the late 50s and early 60s that he made with the help of NASA and Walt Disney. I don't think Walt Disney was still alive at this time. I don't remember, but Disney, the corporation, whatever, and they made all these videos and diagrams and all these things, and literally Werner von Braun, the guy who invented our entire space technology and rocketry from the jump during, before, and after World War II, literally got up there and outlined his plan. And he's like, here's my 10-year plan of how we're going to do this. And as long as we come together, and this is what he said, a unified, well-funded space program, we could be traveling interstellar with artificial gravity ships in 10 years. 10-year plan. And yet that was 70 years ago. And we haven't done that. Why? Well, some people say that it was partly because of the cost. Maybe true. But it was also because we weren't unified as a society, especially after that horrible with the Challenger explosion. I mean, that was crazy because if you watch all these documentaries on it, like I have too, and I watch everything. I love learning about shit. I've been paying for History Vault for years too. I love watching documentaries and shit. But if you look at it, the space industry was struggling at that point. We're talking years after Werner von Braun and his whole idea for traveling to the moon and Mars and everybody else traveling all over space, Sputnik, all of that. And when you look at it, for example, you look at it and you say, oh, well, we weren't unified and we had the cost of it was so great. Okay, yeah, but when they looked at these things, they were struggling. They weren't unified. The cost wasn't there. The financial and also the what's it called? The compliance, the safety procedures, all of that, the technology, none of that was there in this time. And but they looked at it and they said we could try and we could do this and we can go there, but nothing was unified. And because it wasn't unified, their funding wasn't the best. And they were, and sometimes they had to cut corners. Sometimes they cut corners without necessarily needing to cut corners. All these different sorts of things, and it plummeted the idea of NASA in our. This is not my words; these are their words. Plummeted the idea of NASA in the eyes of the people as being like a trustworthy for the people type of group, and what was crazy about that is then the NASA and the military and the government went on this whole campaign to try and get, drum up public support for NASA to get more congressional funding and all of this. And one of the things that they did is they wanted to bring a couple civilians in, and one of these civilians is they had that teacher come on and they had her do videos and interviews all over the world, and everybody's watching and they put their hopes in it and all these dreams, and then the shit explodes right in front of all these people, and you're just like, oh my god, what is going on? And in reality, you just it made their view so much worse because they're trying to do these things and yet they can't get it done, and so there's less unification in the end because you brought us together on one unified belief that these people were going to save the NASA program, save our space. I mean, what are you doing? You're putting a hero complex on a bunch of scientists and they're going to save the universe. Like, oh, this isn't a 60s sci-fi film. Okay, you're not going to go out there and find the doohickey in the desert that's going to help you save the universe from the flimflams. It's not going to happen that way. This isn't Star Trek. It's like Star Trek is great, but that's fantasy, bro. That's literally their idea. That's their this and that. So like it's literally unbelievable. And these, but this is what happened in our own modern culture. And by not being unified on it, we have all these troubles. We're still not unified on it. Our new programs today are they're well funded and stuff, but most of it isn't. And the government is doing a lot of subsidizing to private corporations and private industries. I mean, number one, look at Elon Musk and SpaceX. Number two, Bezos and Blue Origin. I mean, they're literally number three. What's his name? Oh my God, I just drew a blank. Oh man, I just drew a blank on the name. Bronson? The Virgin Mobile guy. What the hell is his name? Oh my god, it's gonna drive me nuts. I know I'm gonna end stream, and as soon as I click end stream, it's gonna instantly appear in my brain. Oh my god, we gotta look it up. We gotta look it up. Name of Virgin Mobile guy. Oh my god. Mobile guy. Richard Branson. Oh my god, dude. I was close with the brand. I wanted to say Brandon. Oh my god, dude. That would have drove me nuts to not remember that and then remember it later on. Like, oh my god. But anyway, so so we go into this, but even our sense of UFOs in our modern time and ancient aliens in our ancient times, it all goes to the sense of community. I mean, I don't know if what it is, but anybody who interacts with a person who claims to have been abducted by UFOs or something, they always say that the message is that we're not unified, we're not a community, we're not this and that. And the answer is like, yeah, we are. So they say like, this is not this is what the problem is. They don't want us having these nuclear weapons. They don't want us having this and that. Now, I postulated in one of our episodes that why would you want them to not have the nuclear weapons? Well, one reason is you might be trying to invade and you don't want them to have something that allows them to get even close to defeating you. I mean, so there was the Brahmastra weapon in Hinduism, and um, J. Robert Oppenheimer, who invented the atom bomb, then quoted the Bhagavad Gita and Shiva, when they launched the nuclear bomb, and said, "I have become death, destroyer of worlds." That is the name of Shiva, the great god. Well, hold the phone. He just told you what his whole purpose is here. He is death, destroyer of worlds. What does that sound like to me? That sounds like Thanos. That sounds like Darkseid. That in DC. That sounds like some sort of world-conquering military force, right? That reminds me of like some sort of like commanding. Imagine the Romans, but as a 10,000 years more advanced space culture than us from another planet. Like that's what that would be. Just battle and conquer, battle and conquer, battle and conquer straight down the line. And that's what it would be. And yet you look at it and you're just like, well, I mean, why would they do this? It's just really crazy. And so I spoke about ways to invade. That was a good episode. The ancient gods episode, the ancient world. The ancient world episode was an awesome episode because again, it goes into our perspective, but it also delves into paleontology and our ancient worlds, archaeology, discovering ancient cities, and then we spoke all the way back about dinosaurs and how the planet itself was physically different then. We spoke about how literally I watched this whole documentary on insects and how they did these whole studies by putting insects in vacuum chambers and giving them different levels of oxygen. And because of the more or less oxygen they got, the bigger or smaller they grew comparatively. So like when the earth had more oxygen 65 million plus years ago when the dinosaurs were here, insects were huge, bro. Why? Because there was more oxygen. And now scientists today have proven that this was the fact. And they're able to use technology to determine that their oxygen intake is directly correlated to their growth because they have these oxygen tubes that come through their exoskeleton. And when they get to a certain size, that oxygen tube literally gets cut off and crimped like a hose being squeezed together by their joints in their like elbows and stuff. So I'm literally showing stream my elbow because like literally that's what you have to think of. Like imagine like a vein going through your elbow, and then every time you bent your elbow, that vein is literally permanently closed. Like that's what it would be like. No more oxygen gets through. It's like it's like crimping the hose, the garden hose. No water's flowing through that. It's the same sort of thing. So it's absolutely awesome. Now, last week we spoke about alien constructs, which I didn't I had to end stream early because of what was going on, but the whole thing was about how we wanted to talk about how physical structures in space and evidences we found across the galaxy for other physical megastructures in space. Before that, we did an episode called Alien Creatures a few episodes prior, where we had a lot of fun discussing different possibilities of alien life forms that could exist on other planets. And it was really fun to talk about these things because I really liked I really liked having those ideas. And astrobiologists do this all the time. They think about, what would life form like on another planet? Remember I invented that whole creature while I was just talking right off the dome of my brain. That I was just like, well, what if this creature had to do this and because of this scenario adapted in this sort of way? And by the end of it, I don't know about you, but I was imagining the creature in my brain. And so, I mean, scientists do this all the time. They think about it. And what's crazy to think about too is the universe is so vast that it's possible that whatever you think of, no matter how abstract, possible it even exists somewhere. Maybe not in this galaxy, maybe not in the next 5 galaxies over, but somewhere, So it was just absolutely crazy. Now, in coming future episodes, we're going to talk about we're going to get into more physics episodes again, and we're going to talk about planetary physics. I may even talk to other people about that. We'll see. But we're going to talk about planetary physics, and I encourage you to go back to episode what was it for? What episode is that? 43, where I talked about atmosphere. And one of the things we spoke about was how Zachariah Sitchin and a few others during this time and later, and even in our modern times right now, modern decades, are postulating that the atmosphere of a planet is really what gives the um the planet its life force and its life abilities and all of that. So and it's possible because this is the theory that, how could life exist on a planet that's a revolution around our star is 3600 years? Well, the answer could only be that somehow its atmosphere retains, whatever. I mean, for all we know, I talked about an atmosphere in that episode. For all we know, when you get through to Venus, it could all just be a smokescreen. And you get through underneath the atmosphere and the clouds and all the gases in the atmosphere, and the planet's fine. Everybody's chilling. But because they're so close to the sun, the atmosphere has more CO2 in it and becomes more of a greenhouse effect. But it also traps in the heat and all this stuff and traps out extra radiation. So you could postulate potentially that life could exist past the clouds if the clouds only and the gases only existed in the atmosphere. Possible, and there are some scientists who have speculated this. It's not just me, and so you could look into this. But we'll talk about it later on. But I really liked that episode, so I wanted to talk about it. And remember, notice if you're in chat, you see the link came up for our website a bunch of times. Click the website, scan the code on the screen, you'll see it. Um, and then you'll go through and it tells you all the episodes. You could add them on whatever platform you listen on, Spotify, Apple Music, whatever. And just go back and listen to it, and I love talking about all of these topics. I mean, it's literally my favorite. I mean, I'll talk to you about it forever. I mean, I can't wait to get into more topics because we're going to get into if we didn't even get into the whole belief yet on I didn't even get into the whole belief and culture perspective today on Lucifer and evil. I only touched on it briefly, and evil and the gods and the rebellions and the armies and the wars in heaven. I barely even touched on that today so far, and yet we have more to talk about with that because and to continue on because you don't realize that it literally has shaped our entire planet's history until now. Even still shaping our history is the belief in all these different beings, and we're going to talk about it more in the future because it involves our community, it involves our passion, it involves our culture, it involves how we look at the world from our modern day perspective and everything in between. It's absolutely so interesting to me. I love it. I love talking about it. And of course, I'm the War Multiverse. I love talking about militaries and cultures and historical battles and religious battles and all these different things. I mean, we talked about the walls of Jericho falling before, and we talked about that in our episode Sound. And so it's all different. So I'm loving it. I really appreciate anybody who came in. Games with Snakes, I appreciate you chatting, my brother. It was awesome. It was great to see you again. I hope I get to tune into you more. Unfortunately, I got to go to the office. So that's it for today. But much love. I can't wait to go on. I can't believe we made it 80 episodes. Next time is episode 81, and we have so much more to continue on about. And if you looked and if you listen to um the episode Caesar Speaks to AI and the bonus episode Caesar, AI, and Bushido, I gave you bonus I gave you little Easter egg hints on what we're going to be talking about and getting into. Now, if you go real quick before we go, our episode 31 is called Timeline. And we went through my own interpretation of the timeline of events that all these religious texts and cultural texts point to, and we go through all of that. And because I find it's very important in our own modern times. I mean, the lost history that we have is written only in our religious texts now. Thousands of years of history is lost, and all we have left is the religious belief versions of it. I mean, you want to talk about how strong belief is? Belief has outlasted the truth of history, no matter what. I mean, so anyway, so I gave you great insights into what we're going to be talking about and how to do it. So if you were listening, you know exactly what I'm going to be saying and exactly what we're going to be talking about. And if you go back to the episode of Timeline and if you rewatch it on, I think that one, the actual VOD is up on YouTube. So you could actually go on our YouTube and rewatch that whole video of me talking about Timeline and where I actually show the diagram of the timeline that I created that I have saved on my computer. So I literally show you that and we go through it all and talk about it. So again, that brings more hints into what we're talking about. So, all right, much love. I really appreciate it. Love everybody, love all the things. But that is it for us today. We will see you next time. Don't forget to follow, whatever, like on on X. I don't really post to YouTube that much, but I'm trying to do that, so we'll get there. And but we'll keep going. So, much love. I really appreciate it, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day, wonderful week, and we'll see you next time. Peace out, y'all.